welcome back to Rodent Sports. Couple of topics this week. One that's a little fresher than the others, and that's what happened at Churchill Downs in the past week. A lot of controversy. First, with several horses dying at the track in races, one dying at the training track, and one who flipped over in the paddock and died. And two of them were trained by a guy by the name of Saffie Joseph Jr., who's based mainly out of Gulfstream Park here in Florida, with a Puerto Rican trainer who's come to the States and has started to build himself a pretty good reputation. Won the Florida Derby last year with White Barrio, who then ran in the Kentucky Derby and ran in a lot of big races last year. This year won the Wood Memorial with Ward Miles at 59-1. So he has two horses die after races. Churchill Downs decides to suspend him and say that his horses died in curious or suspicious circumstances, and they're investigating him. Made him scratch all his horses, including his Derby starter, Lord Miles. Saffie Joseph comes out and says, I'm being scapegoated here, and he may very well have a point, because on Saturday, after this, two more horses died in races on Kentucky Derby Saturday in front of 100 and some thousand people, which is a really terrible thing for the sport. So 7 horses died at Churchill Downs during Kentucky Derby week.
I'm glad my money's tied up in hay.
So Churchill Downs has had issues with horses, getting injured in races and having to be euthanized because they were severe leg injuries. And they may want to take a look at themselves while they're also taking a look at Saffie Joseph. Saffie Joseph is a young trainer, up and coming, as I said, and, he's now damned. He's a guy who may lose a lot of clients, and a lot of owners who might have been looking at him to train their horses will probably avoid him now because of this. And I just hope it hasn't wrecked his career, and I hope Churchill Downs can figure out whatever problem they've got. All of that contributed to Forte, the favorite, scratching Saturday morning. He had hurt himself going out to the track, stepped on a rock or something Wednesday, and bruised his foot. He did gallop in the morning. The veterinarian looked at him and decided that he should be scratched. Probably out of an abundance of caution, given what had happened the previous 5 or 6 days, and then what eventually would happen on Saturday. I think if it had been a normal week, I think he probably would have run, and I still think he would have won. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing. Forte doesn't run. He's the favorite. He won the Florida Derby. He won the Fountain of Youth. A horse he beat in both races, Mage, won the Kentucky Derby. Now, we won't see Forte at the Preakness because he's been put on the vet list for 14 days, which means he can't run in the Preakness. Hopefully, we'll see him at the Belmont in about 4.5 weeks from the day I'm recording this. But we really won't know if he's that much better than Mage, because Mage might be going for a Triple Crown and running his 3rd race in 5 weeks, and Forte will have not run since the Florida Derby in early March. So we won't have it. So if Forte dusts him in that race, we really won't have an answer. Hopefully, we'll see both these horses, Mage and Forte, at Saratoga in either the Jim Dandy Stakes or the Travers. And then we'll have a really good idea of what would have happened in Kentucky if they'd have been allowed to face off. But it was very disappointing not to have Forte, the morning line favorite, in that race. And probably was the right thing to do to scratch him, but I really do think he would have dusted that field given the fact that Mage, who finished 4th at the Fountain of Youth, that Forte won, and then finished 2nd to Forte in the Florida Derby, ended up winning that race. So that's the first thing. That's what happened there with the horses. It was a very controversial week, and it's, thankfully nothing happened in the big race that most of the country watched, the Kentucky Derby, but this has always been an issue, and horse racing has got to be careful and take a look at it. States have tried to solve it by going to synthetic. That didn't really work. It didn't really make a difference. So Churchill Downs, I hope they exonerate Saffie Joseph if he deserves to be exonerated, but they need to look at what their own processes are. They've had trouble at that track with the turf. They had to rip it up and have no turf racing for several months last year when they were open. They only just got turf racing back. So they got to figure their own stuff out there.
If you're in Sarasota, Florida, and hungry for the best pizza in town for the best price, come to the New York Slice Company. We're at the shopping center on Beneva and Fruitville, over by the Publix, where you get good food from a down-to-earth family-owned pizza joint. Trying to get the best option? Forget about it. No one in Florida is making you pizza this good for these low prices. Come on down and let us take care of you.
One taste is all it takes. 2 slices and a drink for $4.95.
Hey, only in New York.
And that brings me to the other big subject, which is a little bit older, but we're going to talk about it anyway because I wanted to weigh in. The big tiff between Kendrick Perkins and Doug Gotlieb. This was over who was going to win the MVP of the NBA this year. Kendrick Perkins was saying that white riders had moved the goalposts so guys like Steve Nash, Nikola Jokic could win the MVP, and Dirk Nowitzki. Doug Gotlieb said that Jokic was probably going to win the MVP again, which would have been 3 in a row, but because of Perk's comments, he didn't. Both of them are very silly people. Doug Gottlieb's an imbecile, and I'll get into that in a moment, but let me start with Kendrick Perkins, who at times is very entertaining on Twitter and on television, but just remember when he says stuff like that, he's a Boston Celtic, which means he's no good, and which means you shouldn't listen to him that often. Most of those Celtics are annoying. He's as annoying. He can be as annoying as any of them, even though he's far more entertaining than some of them. Let's talk about these guys that he's saying they moved the goalpost. The Dirk Nowitzki thing is ridiculous. He was the MVP, 24.6 points a game, 8.6 rebounds a game, 7.4 assists a game, 50-40-90. That's 50% from the field, 40% from 3, 90% from the foul line. His team won 67 games, which was the best in the NBA. Yes, they lost in the first round of the NBA playoffs that year, but it's a regular season award. Nobody was questioning Dirk winning it. It just didn't look so great when Dirk was given the award right after his team got knocked out as a 1 seed by the 8th seeded Golden State Warriors. So that's a ludicrous thing ludicrous example, for Kendrick Perkins to use. Now we go to Steve Nash. 2005, I can almost see an argument. Although they did win 62 games, and that was best in the NBA, 15.5 points a game, 11.5 assists per game. Shaq played 73 games that year and averaged 23 points and over 10 boards and shot 60% from the field. But the Suns were the best team that year. Nash was the best player on the best team.
Guess I have to work harder, step up to his level. That's what great players do. They bring the best out of everyone on the team.
So he's better than you?
Yes.
And stacks more paper and gets more holes than you?
Absolutely.
Got no argument there. 2006 is probably a little marginal, but even still, 79 games, 18.8 points a game that season, 10.5 assists a game, 92% from the foul line, another 50-40-90 player. Fourth best wins in the league. The Suns had 54 wins, only behind Detroit, San Antonio, Dallas. Kobe had a really great season. He had 35 points a game, but his team was 45-37. So, again, I think it's not the easiest. There's maybe a little bit more of a case there that Nash shouldn't have won that. I had no problem with him winning that year. It is a regular season award. That's what it's about. You don't include the playoffs. The ballots basically have to be in right after the regular season ends. I think it's either due the next day or the day after the season ends, so it's before the start of the playoffs. It's a regular season award. Now let's get to Jokic. Okay. 2021, Jokic. Team wins 47 games in a shortened season because that was after the COVID. 4th best, only behind Philadelphia, Phoenix, and Utah. 26 points a game, 10.8 rebounds per game, 8 assists per game. I had no problem with him winning it that year. 2022, even better. 74 games, 27 points a game, 11.8 rebounds a game, nearly 8 assists a game. He had 48 wins. This is really close. Embiid's team won 51 games that year. He played 68, 30 points a game, 11.7 rebounds a game, 4 assists a game. Giannis Antetokounmpo played 61 games that year, and that's probably why he didn't win it that year. But his team won 51 games as well. 29.9 points a game, 11.9 rebounds a game, 5.8 assists a game. If you want to say Jokic shouldn't have won in 2022, I'm not gonna really furiously argue the point.
When you're the best, you don't like to walk into the room and concede.
I don't know how you split those 3. To me, you could pick any of them. So I think Kendrick Perkins is wrong about that. You could have picked any of them. I think at a push, I would have probably given it to Embiid that year. But I'm also kind of in the tank for Joel Embiid, so, that's okay. Embiid versus Jokic in 2023. Philadelphia, 54 wins. Embiid plays 66 games. And this is where I thought I was going to have a real beef here, because one of the arguments I had with Embiid winning it is that You miss that many dadgum games. It's nearly a fifth of the season. I'm not sure you should get the MVP. Well, Jokic only played 3 more games. He played 69 games. Denver 53 wins. The point is, the idea that Doug Gotlieb advanced that Kendrick Perkins is that big a voice in NBA punditry that he can move several writers to change their votes from Jokic to Embiid, such that Embiid won the MVP because of what he said and bringing race into it. That's nonsense. Doug Gottlieb's an imbecile.
Why do I talk?
Don't listen to him very often. And the notion that Kendrick Perkins advances that the goalposts were moved so that Jokic could win multiple MVPs, Nash could win multiple MVPs, and that Dirk won an MVP and that they really didn't deserve it, that's dumb. You could probably have an argument with either of Nash's MVPs that there were questions about him. But one year they won 62 games. He was the best player on the best team. That's always a good bar for me. I have no problem with that. The second one, less so, but he had a better season that year than he did the previous year. And look, you could certainly give one of Jokic's MVPs to Giannis or Embiid. There's no question about that. But Jokic is that good. And again, much like Nash, head of the snake with that team. So I'm not going to have a problem with that. One thing I want to say about Joel Embiid, he's fun. He's been fun from the moment he got in the league. He's fun to watch. He plays the right way a lot of the time. If you watched Game 4 against Boston, he basically wins the game by kicking that pass out to Harden. Harden hitting the open shot. So I'm glad to see Joel Embiid win an MVP award because he's a likable player and he's a great player and he's fun to watch. But don't waste your time with Doug Gottlieb and Kendrick Perkins too much. Please don't. And don't tip in, especially the racial angle on this stuff with these awards, because it's silly. And because we're trying to have a great playoffs, and it's been a pretty good playoffs in spite of everything with the injuries and stuff. And don't ruin it with these goofy, clickbait, dopey arguments like the type that Kendrick Perkins and Doug Gottlieb had with each other.
You're crazy, boy. There's no oil in this ground.
Just leave them guys alone and focus on there are good pundits in the NBA, even if the NBA's got a bit of a questionable pundit problem. You got Doris Burke, you got Monica McNutt, you've got doggone Adrian Wojnarowski, you got the guys on NBA on the NBA TNT show.
Listen, yeah, y'all play like I'm gonna be the old man, get off my lawn. Y'all sit there and watch this stupid ass basketball.
You can listen to all those folks, and you can enjoy this without listening to the people who say silly and dopey things.
Yeah.
To try to get attention for themselves.
Ahem.
What?
Who else do they got?
Well, hopefully they have us. Hopefully they have me too. But I'm not on national television, profunding about basketball. I wish I was. I'd love to be sitting with Michael Wilbon talking basketball on ESPN or the NBA on TNT, guys. Just don't fall in that trap, because that's all Gotlieb and Perkins were doing, with just clickbaiting for themselves, and they're very silly at times. Although at least Perkins is somewhat entertaining. Gottlieb's an idiot, and you should listen to him as little as possible. So that's Rodent Sports this week. Thank you for listening. Like, share, comment. We appreciate the feedback. We always like the conversation. Talk to you next time.